You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to speak to America's hardworking farmers and food producers. We should know. FLM Harvest is a strategic, full-service creative consultancy proud to reach more farmers, farmer boards, and food and commodity associations than any agency in the country. And we understand omni-channel as well as we understand the journey from field to fork. Most importantly, we connect clients to the audiences that matter to them.
Hello and welcome to Agri-Pulse TV for the Meet the Farm Hands video segment. I'm your host, Hannah Pagel, and today we are joined with Dana Brooks with the Pet Food Institute. Dana, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So let's just start off and get an idea of like your career. So let's just start from the beginning and then kind of work your way up to how you came out to DC.
Oh my, do you really want all of that? So I'm from Southeast Arkansas originally, and I studied agriculture at two universities, Arkansas State and University of Arkansas Monticello. I always wanted to be a grain merchandiser, commodity broker, and that's what I did right out of college. I worked for Riceland Foods in Stuttgart, Arkansas. And I thought I was living my dream job, but unfortunately, an unfortunate event. My father was killed in a farm accident in '96, and that really changed the trajectory of my career and my life. And then fast forward to 2000, and a member of Congress from Arkansas was looking for someone to do the Farm Bill, and I just knew that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to represent farmers because I couldn't farm, and I thought that I could be a voice for agriculture in DC. So I moved to DC in 2000 and have moved through congressional offices, both Democrat and Republican. I've worked for ag organizations here, and through that route I found myself at Pet Food Institute, which was seemed a bit off the path, but I feel like it was a very direct line to here.
Okay. And going back to Arkansas, now I heard you grew up on a catfish farm, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so kind of explain what catfish farming is like and what was your role on the farm growing up?
Sure. So early on, my parents did, my dad was a cotton ginner, and we had a little cotton, and we did custom baling, raking, hauling, and putting up hay in the summers. But my dad always wanted to work for himself, and my grandparents were retiring from the Catfish Farm. They were Catfish Farmers of America winners in the 70s, the 80s, and they started kind of the first to start in the catfish farming world. And the industry was really great during those years, and of course my parents got into it in the early 90s, and unfortunately that's when things were very difficult in agriculture. We learned that you couldn't get a traditional farm loan with catfish. We were also battling the imports or dumping of catfish into the United States from Vietnam and China. And those were the things that, the pressures that we were under, as well as that during that time we had historical high feed and fuel prices. So all those challenges came into play when we went into the farming industry. And I would go home on the weekends to help my dad, the oldest of three girls. All of us learned how to drive a tractor and seine catfish, which riding the line, which you stood in the ponds and you held the top of the seine and you had your feet on the bottom, and you basically were just dragged through a catfish pond as you're herding catfish. So
herding catfish. Okay, do you have any interesting stories of being taken down by one of them catfish?
They can get rather large, but you prefer them not to be. The story that my family always remember is what really prompted my fear of snakes, because it's water and it's in the south, and we have a lot of snakes. So we would have to rake the grass around the farm of the pond, and when we would rake the grass around to get a cleaner seine, sometimes you would see snakes bubbling up. And as soon as I had finished raking, then I was driving the tractor, and then the seine got tangled, so I had to jump in the water to pull the seine up. And when I did that, snakes came up, and I actually went into a little bit of a freak out and my dad had to come over and physically lift me up and carry me out of the pond and put me back on the tractor, and I think I cried for 2 days after that.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine.
But needless to say, I couldn't even watch The Jungle Book for years because of the snake in The Jungle Book.
Don't blame you. So coming to DC then, you've jumped around from a couple of different top ag organizations between Land O'Lakes and American Farm Bureau and Elanco. So what are some of the policy areas that you find very interesting, or what are kind of your niche that you like to hit and cover?
You know, it was exciting for me when I came to Washington, D.C. to have worked in a grain elevator in that world and understanding, when farmers had to go to the then ASCS office, the documents that they were signing and submitting, and to watch that go through the process from generic certificates and to direct, then we had direct payments and different production assistance through the years. It's like being a part of that was really exciting. Be a part of drafting farm policy. I thought like the Farm Bill was the Bible in our world. So to be a part of drafting that was definitely the coolest thing I felt like I had achieved in my career, and being a part of that from Southern agriculture to dairy policy. I thought tobacco and peanut and cotton and sugar policy was hard until I went to work for National Milk Producers and drafted the dairy policy, which I still have scars from. But I think that for me to know that I'm working on something that at the end of the day can benefit a farmer back home was always why that was why I was here. That was my why.
Mm-hmm. So. And as you've moved from different ag companies throughout your career, what were some of the key takeaways that you took from each organization that brought you here today?
Well, in the pet food world, our ingredients come almost directly from the farm. They're raw commodities. It's from the grains, the legumes, but also meat production. So you can see that tie in what we do to provide that economic impact to agriculture is important to me. Of course, my family we always had dogs. We had horses, we've had pets of all types, from raccoons to, ducks. But to know that on a farm life, how important pets are, or your working companions as well. And so it just seemed a natural fit for me, one, to go to the pet food space because of the relationship to agriculture, but then also to know how important our pets or companion animals are to our everyday life and on the farm. And it's a personal story for me. When my dad died and my mom was left alone at 46 years old. Of course, she had, daughters and grandkids, but her constant companion was a Chihuahua. And it was because the Chihuahua, she would, eat and get up and do things that would have been harder to do if she wouldn't have had a motivator. So it's been, I've seen the importance of a dog and how it has health benefits, and a cat. We've got our feline friends.
About them. Even the goldfish. So, speaking of pets, do you have pets yourself, since you are the president and CEO of the Pet Food Institute?
This is the most embarrassing question to have to answer. Today, I do not have a pet. My lifestyle is a little difficult to have a pet at home. However, I have surrounded myself with my friends' pets and their children, but most of the photo or art in our office are our friends in Washington, D.C., their pets, and I've probably I've been a pet sitter, an auntie to Chesney that's behind you since she was a puppy. So I get my pet feel and the love of that, but then when I travel, I don't feel so guilty about leaving home.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So through your jobs that you've had, I'm assuming you've had to travel quite a bit. Can you maybe touch on what's been probably the neatest experience that you've encountered or have been a part of, or maybe touch on that a little bit? Sure.
When I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2000, I think I had been to about 5 or 6 states in my life, and most of those were around the state of Arkansas. So I never dreamed that I would have the experience I've had being in D.C. And I credit seeing more largely with my Farm Bureau experience. working for American Farm Bureau, there was no shortage of meetings we could attend in states or around the country. So, and then after 20 years in DC, I think I've been to all but 2 states. But and most recently Alaska to meet with the pulse crop growers who are the pulse crop industry, which is very important to pet food manufacturing. But a few minutes of can say that one of the coolest places, or one of those highlights of my life, definitely was going to Cuba and staffing 6 members of Congress in 2002, just right after 9/11. We went to Cuba, and President Castro then offered to send medical supplies and assistance to the United States. We were there to talk about trade with agriculture, and my former boss at the time, Representative Joanne Emerson, said, if you'll just buy 1 grain of rice from us, we'll do what we can to open up, travel and trade restrictions in the United States. And we worked very hard, and that was just an amazing experience to be a part of that, and then being able to sit on the House floor during some really key critical votes on Cuba agriculture trade.
So let's kind of get an idea of who Dana is outside of the work zone, workforce. So I hear you like to scuba dive and spearfish. How on earth did you get involved in this?
Well, my dad was a scuba diver in Arkansas, no less, and he was just always a kid at heart. So he started scuba diving. He's of that generation watching Sea Hunt, Lloyd Bridges. So he and a buddy got certified in Arkansas, and they spearfished a bit in Arkansas. But so I dived with him. But it wasn't until after he passed, and I think I was feeling something missing in my life, and I wanted to connect with my dad. So I took scuba classes, and I discovered it was really pretty amazing when I had my own gear that fit me, not my dad's gear. And it was just an amazing experience to be underwater. And clearly I'm a talker, and it's one of those few times I can be at peace and enjoy a nearly soundless environment. So I've been scuba diving since 1998. I'm now an instructor. But there is nothing more exciting to me than spearfishing underwater. And we are doing our part for sustainable aquaculture by annihilating the invasive species, the lionfish. So that's what we do, and I enjoy that a lot. But it's pretty exciting. About 100 feet is what we average diving. So.
Wow. Is there a particular place that you prefer to scuba dive or spearfish, or is it just anywhere you can?
One of my favorite places to scuba dive is North Carolina, the Outer Banks, because there's so many natural wrecks. And I really enjoyed learning about the wrecks, the history of those, the World War II, submarines. It's shocking to know how close that war was actually to our shores, and we didn't realize it as U.S. citizens. So that's one of my favorite things to do. But then as far as spearfishing, I just go to the Gulf of Mexico, Destin, Fort Walton Beach, and enjoy that time with my family and friends there. And I really enjoy introducing other women to scuba diving, because it's such an empowering and amazing experience that it's been my goal to introduce as many women as I can, even here in Washington, D.C., to scuba diving, and we enjoy getting that little break.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes into my next question. So being a strong woman in agriculture, can you talk about how you mentor other women in this field?
Oh, that is my favorite thing to do. When I moved to Washington, D.C., I was here a few months, and I called my mom, and I was like, I found women friends. There are women here that are just like me. And it was the first time in my life I felt like I really fit in somewhere and could relate to other women, and they could relate to me. So some wonderful women in Washington, D.C. mentored me, but the person that had the woman that had the most influence on me moving to Washington, D.C. was Senator Lincoln from Arkansas. And I campaigned on her second congressional campaign when she was Blanche Lambert, and I met with her because of agriculture and what was going on our farm. And then getting here and making friends, and some other women in DC, started mentoring me or encouraging me and introducing me around, taking time to invest in me. And so about 7 years later, I left briefly and I came back. It's like we need to give back. This is so important. Women are moving to DC. Women in agriculture are moving to DC. And we have those basic questions like, where do I buy a hammer? Where do I go to church? Where do you buy that dress? As well as, what's going on in the dairy program in your state, or, what's happening with, cotton in the South. So women have a different way of communicating with each other. So we started, having lunches that turned into happy hours that have then turned into some philanthropic projects. And it just took off, and great thanks to some of those early folks that encourage women that came in into courage. So multiple generations, and I can't thank those that helped support me enough to be able to then let's give back to those. And it's great to see you here.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So what advice do you have to young women who are maybe on the fence about coming out to Washington, D.C., or on the fence about joining the agriculture industry? What message do you have for them?
Don't be afraid of it. Come to Washington, D.C., even if it's for a week or 6 months, because the experience you have here can be life-changing. Plug in immediately with other women, and there are women here that are willing to mentor or just have lunch and coffee with. Never stop meeting people, asking for support. You learn through listening too. So reach out to and across the aisles. I've worked for both parties, and I think that's one of the things we miss. So if we feel that need to be partisan, at least reach out to other, women. If you're a woman in agriculture, somebody had to break the bar for you, and appreciate that, and then take and learn and be a leader and give back.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap up today, we always like to end the segment with this question, but if you could go back to day one, being young Dana on the Hill and in the agriculture industry, what advice would you tell yourself on that very first day, knowing what you know now?
You can't change the world in one day. Take a deep breath and enjoy the ride. Learn from everyone. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Challenge yourself, but lean on others. I wore myself out early on, and it's like, remember to recharge and just work hard, and you will be. This is one of those towns where you're rewarded for hard work, but keep balance. And that's something I still struggle with every day. But find that balance, find your place of peace, and have your sisterhood to support you.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dana Brooks, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you.